As the Junggar Basin in Xinjiang was gradually being swallowed by desertification, an ambitious reintroduction program brought 11 Przewalski's horses back to a land where they had disappeared decades earlier. But survival would prove to be the real challenge. Winter temperatures could fall below -40 degrees Celsius, water was scarce, and dust storms could last for days. When the Chinese government decided to return horses born in zoos across Europe and North America to the wild, most ecologists believed the project was destined to fail. Yet a few decades later, those same horses became a key factor in restoring the ecosystem and slowing the spread of desertification across the region. What drove the Przewalski's horse to the brink of extinction? Today, join Mandarin Tech as we explore how scientists brought these ghosts of the steppe back to their homeland, launching one of the most ambitious ecosystem restoration projects in the world. The Przewalski's horse is considered the last truly wild horse on Earth, a surviving relic of the Ice Age and one of the very few animals that has never been fully domesticated by humans. Unlike modern domestic horses, which possess 64 chromosomes, the Przewalski's horse has 66 chromosomes, indicating a distinct evolutionary lineage. It has a compact, muscular build, a sandy brown coat, an upright mohawk-like mane, and faint stripes on its legs. With an appearance that has remained largely unchanged for thousands of years, it looks more like a creature from prehistoric cave paintings than a modern horse. For thousands of years, these wild horses roamed the vast grasslands stretching from Mongolia to the Junggar Basin in northwestern China. They were not only part of the ecosystem, but also helped shape the landscape itself. However, by the middle of the 20th century, hunting, expanding human settlements, competition with livestock, and prolonged droughts had caused the Przewalski's horse population to decline rapidly. In 1969, the last traces of the species were recorded by a Soviet geological survey team. A few hoofprints pressed into dried mud and several strands of tan hair caught on sparse desert grasses. After that, the last wild horse on Earth disappeared from the wild. The extinction of the Przewalski's horse left a significant void in the Junggar ecosystem. Within just a few years, signs of ecological decline began to appear across the region's vast grasslands. Without herds of wild horses moving across and disturbing the soil surface, the ground in many parts of the Junggar Basin gradually hardened into what researchers later described as biological concrete. Rainwater could no longer infiltrate the soil and instead remained on the surface before evaporating within a matter of hours. Seeds struggled to germinate, while nitrogen levels in the soil declined dramatically. By 1974, some scientists had begun comparing soil samples from the region to lunar dust. Minerals were still present, but life had all but disappeared. Meanwhile, the Gobi Desert continued expanding at a rate of approximately 70 kilometers per decade, swallowing grasslands, villages, and agricultural land. By the early 1980s, dust storms from northwestern China had begun affecting Beijing, more than 1,600 kilometers away. Hospitals reported a 300% increase in respiratory-related emergencies. In an effort to combat the crisis, China launched the Green Great Wall Project in 1978. Aiming to establish a forest belt stretching approximately 4,500 kilometers. However, the results fell far short of expectations. The artificial forests consumed more water than the environment could sustainably provide, causing groundwater levels in some areas to drop significantly. Many trees began dying from the roots upward, and some villages were even forced to relocate after their wells ran dry. By 1985, agricultural productivity in Xinjiang had fallen by 34%, and desertification had become a full-scale environmental crisis. The desert continued advancing eastward at an accelerating pace. Computer models at the time even warned that if the trend continued, parts of the regions surrounding Beijing could become extremely difficult to inhabit by the middle of the 21st century. It was against this backdrop that a group of Chinese ecologists began asking a bold question. Could the return of the Przewalski's horse help revive an ecosystem that was slowly dying? Although the Przewalski's horse had disappeared from the wild, it had not become completely extinct. A small number of the last remaining individuals were still being maintained in zoos and conservation centers across Europe. By 1985, only about 900 Przewalski's horses remained worldwide, and every one of them lived in captivity. The entire population was descended from just 12 to 14 individuals removed from the wild at the beginning of the 20th century. After World War II, their numbers had fallen to only 31 animals, and at one point the species survived in just 2 zoos, Munich and Prague. The entire future of the last wild horse on Earth depended on a small captive population living behind zoo fences. In 1985, China officially launched its Przewalski's horse reintroduction program. A specialized breeding and training center was established in Jimsar County near the species' historic range. At the same time, negotiations were carried out with international zoos and conservation organizations to identify the most suitable animals for the project. The plan was divided into 3 stages. First, horses would be transported from Western zoos to the breeding center in Jimsar. Next, they would be moved into large semi-wild enclosures to help restore natural behaviors that had faded after generations in captivity. Finally, individuals that met the necessary requirements would be released into the Kalamali Nature Reserve, an area covering approximately 4,000 square kilometers and one of the harshest environments in Asia. However, before these horses could return to the grasslands, scientists first had to find a way to help them adapt to life in the wild. Unlike their ancestors, which once roamed the vast steppes of Central Asia, the horses selected for the reintroduction program had all been born in captivity. They were accustomed to a reliable food supply, stable water sources, and had rarely faced the challenges of survival in a natural environment. For the first time in more than a decade since disappearing from the wild, the last wild horse on Earth stood on the threshold of returning to its ancestral homeland. On the day the first herd of Przewalski's horses was released back into the Junggar Basin, numerous journalists and documentary crews traveled to the region to record what they believed would be the final chapter of an ambitious conservation effort. Most experts at the time believed that failure was only a matter of time. Despite widespread skepticism and the risks involved, Chinese ecologists remained convinced that bringing the Przewalski's horse back to the Junggar Basin was not merely an attempt to save a species from extinction. They believed it could also become the key to restoring a severely degraded ecosystem. An adult Przewalski's horse weighs approximately 270 to 360 kilograms. Each day, the herd moves across the grasslands, repeatedly striking the ground with enough force to break apart soil that has been compacted for years, allowing rainwater to infiltrate the ground once again. Traveling approximately 15 kilometers per day creates different grazing zones. As they feed, the horses create a mosaic of tall grass, short grass, and bare patches of land, providing habitats for a wide variety of species. Even horse manure contributes to ecosystem recovery. Analysis has shown that it contains seeds from more than 20 different plant species. After passing through the horse's digestive systems, many of these seeds can experience germination rates that increase by as much as 300%, helping redistribute vegetation across large areas and bringing life back to landscapes that have been degraded for many years. That was the theory. In reality, however, the horses selected for the reintroduction program had spent several generations in captivity. They had never needed to find water on their own, evade predators, or survive the harsh environmental conditions of the Junggar Basin. Difficulties appeared almost immediately. Just a few weeks after arriving in Jimsar, the herd became infested with botflies. These parasites invaded the horses' stomachs, damaging the stomach lining and causing digestive disorders at precisely the time when they needed to build up energy reserves for the coming winter. Then came the first winter, with temperatures dropping to nearly -41 degrees Celsius. Several horses suffered severe frostbite, and 2 mares miscarried. Throughout this period, the staff at Jimsar could do little more than monitor the herd from a distance using binoculars and observation stations. They were instructed not to intervene unless the entire herd showed signs of severe distress or faced the risk of being wiped out. But something unexpected happened. The horses began displaying behaviors that had never been recorded in captivity. They used their hooves to break through ice in search of water, dug through snow to reach grass, and formed protective circles around foals during snowstorms. Scientists realized that their ancestral survival instincts had never disappeared. They had simply remained dormant. Results appeared faster than expected. By the spring of 1987, several grass species that had been absent from the Junggar Basin for 17 years began reappearing. Plant biomass in grazed areas was approximately 43% higher than in ungrazed control sites. In the first year alone, soil water retention increased by approximately 23% as thousands of hoofprints trapped rainwater on the surface. By the second year, nitrogen levels in the soil had increased by approximately 37%. By the third year, 22 plant species that had previously disappeared had returned. The Junggar ecosystem had not truly died. It had simply been waiting for the return of a species that once played a critical role in maintaining ecological balance. As vegetation recovered, other animals gradually returned as well. Dung beetles, insects, birds, rodents, and eventually predators such as foxes, steppe eagles, and gray wolves began reappearing throughout the region. One by one, the links within the ecosystem were reconnected, creating a natural cycle of recovery that very few people had believed was possible. August 2001 marked a major milestone in the Reintroduction program when 27 Przewalski's horses were fully released into the Kalamali Nature Reserve. There were no fences, no supplemental feeding, and no regular human support. Ahead of them lay more than 4,000 square kilometers of arid land where the species had been absent for 32 years. Scientists fitted the horses with GPS collars, installed camera traps, and monitored them remotely. During the first week, the herd remained close to the release site. But on the 8th day, a stallion named Hong unexpectedly led the herd approximately 30 kilometers to a water source that appeared on no map. To this day, researchers have been unable to explain exactly how he found it. Within just 1 month, the horses had begun establishing territories and adapting to life in the wild. Reproductive success in the wild was approximately 87% higher than that of many captive populations. Foals born in the wild also quickly displayed survival skills absent in zoo-born generations, from recognizing dozens of plant species to responding to threats from above. The transformation was not limited to the horses themselves. Satellite imagery revealed green patches gradually spreading outward from their habitat areas. The groundwater table, which had been declining by approximately 3 centimeters per year since 1970, began to stabilize in 2003 and then started to rise again. After decades of degradation, the Junggar ecosystem appeared to be functioning once more. The success of the Junggar Basin project prompted many scientists to rethink conventional approaches to combating desertification. For decades, China had relied primarily on the Green Great Wall project, which aimed to stop desert expansion by planting billions of trees. However, in some arid regions, these artificial forests consumed excessive amounts of water and failed to deliver the expected results. In contrast, Przewalski's horses helped restore the ecosystem in a more natural way. Their hoofprints allowed rainwater to penetrate the soil, while their grazing activity helped maintain grasslands, an ecosystem that requires far less water than forests. Researchers estimated that a single Przewalski's horse could improve water retention across approximately 50 hectares of land each year. With more than 500 individuals living in Xinjiang, their impact extended across roughly 26,700 hectares. When ecological economists evaluated the benefits provided by these animals, they estimated that each Przewalski's horse generated approximately $47,000 in ecological value annually through soil restoration, seed dispersal, water retention, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity support. The herd in Xinjiang alone was estimated to generate approximately $25 million in ecological benefits each year, not including its value for tourism, scientific research, and cultural heritage. Once on the brink of extinction, the Przewalski's horse has become a key force in the recovery of the very landscape from which it disappeared. The journey of the Przewalski's horse shows that restoring nature does not always begin with massive engineering projects or complex technologies. Sometimes, it begins with the return of a missing piece of the ecosystem. From the brink of extinction, the world's last truly wild horse not only found its way back home, but also helped awaken a landscape that had been slipping into decline for decades. If the Junggar Basin is proof of the power of nature-based restoration, then the story of the Przewalski's horse reminds us that saving an ecosystem is not always about replacing nature, but about giving it the chance to heal itself. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mandarin Tech for more fascinating stories about engineering, technology, and environmental restoration from around the world.